Hello everyone and welcome back. Before we get into the main course of today's video, I'm going to be talking about a strange coincidence that happened recently that made me very happy. Recently, during the D&D Direct live stream, and I know this was a while back, we got to see a few new campaigns announced, one of which happens to be the official return of the SpellJammer setting to 5th edition. I know people have been homebrewing space stuff for ages, but I personally love it when Wizards of the Coast puts out canon content. Plus, there's just something really nice about having a physical book. Although it won't be available until August, I can at least tell you what's going to be coming with the SpellJammer Kit. Inside of this kit, the first book will be called the Astral Adventurer's Guide. It's a 64-page hardcover book that details the astral plane as a campaign setting and includes space-based character options, spells, magic items, deck plans for ships, and descriptions for ships, and of course more. The second book is Boo's Astral Menagerie. It's a 64-page hardcover book that contains stats and descriptions for over 60 characters found within Wild Space and the Astral Sea. And that includes astral elves, cosmic horrors, lunar and solar dragons, murder comets, and space clowns? I don't remember that being a thing in the old lore, but either way, when August hits, I will most likely be very terrified. The third book is actually a supplemental adventure called The Light of Xerxes. It's a 64-page hardcover book that is set in the astral plane and is designed for characters between 5 and 8. Sadly, from what I could see, no further info was given on this adventure. And lastly, we actually have a 4-sided DM shield that, of course, matches the SpellJammer theme, with info from all 3 books detailed on the inside panels. And of course, it also comes with a nice poster map of an asteroid city called the Rock of Brawl. Supposedly, it's meant to be used as either a hub or adventuring location within the Astral Sea. So, if you're interested, I'll be sure to put a link in the description below. Alright, now it is time for the main course of today's episode. For this video, we will be looking at 3 interesting things that you can find out in the Astral Sea. In at number 1, we have a fairly unique satellite orbiting the planet Carpri. This elven-made satellite is actually 7 archaic man-of-war ships welded together due to an overgrowth of their crystalline wings. For all intents and purposes, this facility shares one central gravity plane and has all of its weapons pointed outward into open space in every direction. Many generations ago, it was used to protect the aquatic elves who had become transplanted from the waters around Evermeet on Toril into the oceans of Carpri below. The whole reason for this move was because the elves of Evermeet had feared the extinction of their waterbound kin at the hands of encroaching humans. This massive ship was meant to run in 12-year-long shifts, protecting the planet. But it only made it 144 years until it was decimated by Illithids, and subsequently abandoned. In the time since it's been empty, the air within this place has turned deadly and poisonous. Any ships that gets too close runs the risk of poisoning their own air supply as well. The whole reason the Illithids attacked was simply just to find out what it was protecting and to take it. Turns out, they didn't actually find anything and promptly left. Every last elf stationed there took the secret of their waterbound kin to their graves. To this day, the base is actually haunted by the ghosts of the 30 elves who died while on duty. And, interestingly enough, simply looking at them causes any humanoid to age by 10 years and try to run away in panic. These ghosts, even in their afterlife, still devote themselves to ensuring that the base never falls into enemy hands. Although they consider all non-elves as enemies, thankfully they choose to scare off people before actually attacking them by just showing themselves. And interestingly enough, all other elves have free run of the base, so long as they pretend to be watching over the aquatic elves below. Otherwise, they will be turned on. These poor ghosts. Their job will never be done so long as a single aquatic elf lives on that planet. And thinking about it, this whole satellite by itself would be a pretty interesting one-shot campaign. In at number 2, we have the Skull of the Void. Now, before I get into it, some of y'all might be thinking it's something like Nowhere from the Guardians of the Galaxy. While I do understand the logic, there just isn't any lore covering its origins. For all we know, it could just be some morbid facsimile of a skull instead of an actual skull. This one is rather interesting, because it contains something unexpected, but at the same time makes total sense once you think about it. This freestanding astrological body is approximately 12 miles high and 10 miles wide, and is isolated 50 million miles away from our crystal sphere. It is completely stationary, and nothing else is even remotely close to it. And yes, strangely enough, it does resemble a human skull, and appears to be made of regular bone. But at the same time, it somehow can produce its own oxygen, and has the capability to repair itself magically. But that's not even the best part yet. It's actually the home of an entire colony of isolated elithids. The reason they're isolated though is because they actually have over 100 beholders corralled as a food source. They continually chop off their extra eyes and brand their big eye in order to keep them powerless. The primary reason for doing this is to create the ultimate beholder brain through selective breeding with 7 different species of beholder. And since average beholders have brains roughly 4 feet in diameter, the elithids just can't help themselves and see the beholders as a commodity. And seeing as how the dynamics of elithids and beholders is vastly different everywhere else in the universe, this colony and its breeding experiments are a pretty well-kept secret. What's interesting is the consumption of the beholder brains by this colony has caused them to develop the glands in their brains that naturally give them the ability to float. This increased movement speed and consumption of beholder brains has become so ingrained in their way of life that losing it would be a fate worse than death for them. In the end, they have earned immense scorn from normal elithids outside of the colony who have become aware of their existence. Thankfully for them though, even if they don't understand it yet, the levitating gene is now permanently ingrained in their DNA. So if they ever lost their food source, their progeny would still retain the ability to float. Thankfully for us though, they haven't gained the beholder's magical eye abilities yet. Thinking about the transition of realm years, I really hope this colony will be more fleshed out when the new book comes in August. And lastly, in at number 3, is actually Elminsters Hideout. This one was completely unexpected for me, but I was pretty happy to see it regardless. The hideout is actually a giant globe 250 feet in diameter, and is seemingly made out of a shiny metallic substance that spins and reflects all light striking it, making a rainbow pattern effect. It also happens to put out a deep and constant humming noise that can rattle your teeth from 1,300 feet away. This hideout is actually located close to the center of the planet Koliar. Now, I won't go into the details of the way this weird planet functions, But I will say that a red dragon from Toril by the name of Firebrand Flametongue has chosen to retire from its former life and live out the rest of its days on this planet. Elminster, the little scamp that he is, has made this hideout originally to police the dragon and make sure it didn't actually cause any trouble. After about a century though, he finally decided that the dragon was telling the truth and released himself from his duty. Ever since then, he's used this place as his personal getaway. And knowing the old mage, ended up adding a bunch of extra stuff to it. Although many believe the sphere to be completely solid, El actually prefers if no one ever figured out the truth. On the inside are 8 walls, half of which are lined with shelves containing thousands of potions and scrolls. Under one shelf in particular, and I'm not even going to bother with the description for this one, I'm fairly certain it's a Frigidaire AC unit. Supposedly he has the thing because it gets pretty hot inside of that hideout. And if you were wondering how he got his hands on a AC unit, you're about to find out. Now, while there are no visible doors on the outside of the sphere, from the inside, El has 4 special doors that lead to 4 different places. The first leads back to El's castle, and since his hideout has a code word, among other automatic functions that get him inside of the sphere, he usually prefers this method to getting back home instead of just casting a spell. This way he can just say the code word, pop inside the sphere, and then walk through the door to his castle. It's pretty lazy, but also pretty smart. The second door actually opens up to a beautiful square within the Temple of Maestra on the island of Evermeet. In all his travels, he's gained many friends here and has fought side by side with the elves of the island many times to defend their home. Although humans usually aren't accepted within several hundred miles of the island, El is actually one of the few standing exceptions to all of the rules of the island. The third door, now this is where things get neat. This third door specifically leads into Yellowstone National Park in the year 1894. Without regurgitating the descriptions, this place is beautiful. And it is actually El's favorite place to relax outside of Toril. And it also so happens that this is where he acquires German beers, and his friend Gamelong from the Rock of Brawl is constantly bugging him about them. And finally, the fourth door actually opens up to the library of Mr. Ed Greenwood. Supposedly, this is how El's been pestering Ed for years with his long-winded stories and additional demands for German beer. And something about a hot water spout. Thankfully though, none of these special doors can be seen from the outside on the locations they lead to. El in general just looks like he's appearing out of thin air whenever he walks through them. And also, for those of you who don't know, Ed Greenwood is pretty much the father of all D&D, and for all intents and purposes, is Elminster himself. Alright, and that wraps up everything for today. Those are 3 interesting things you can find in the Astral Sea. A massive satellite made of a bunch of ships stuck together, piloted by ghosts, a massive skull filled with elithids in the middle of nowhere, and a shiny hot sphere that turns out to be Elminster's secret hideaway. As much as I love that last entry, the info on it became more cozy and secretive instead of spacey or spooky. Thinking about the passage of realm years in relation to ours, I really hope that when the new book comes out in August, we'll see a reflection of current events or just a simple update of everything else that used to be in here. Until then though, I will endeavor to do my best to bring out more videos like this one. Until next time everyone, stay safe out there.